But if someone has a gun and is trying to kill you, it would be reasonable to shoot back with your own gun. Not at the head, where a fatal wound might result, but at some other body part, such as a leg. Well, hello everybody. It's Mr. Second Amendment, and thank you for joining me for another Almanack, my version of a podcast. And I think I'm going to keep the tradition going of opening the podcast here, the Almanack, with a random quote that actually matters and is relevant to the topic at hand. Well, who said that? I think most of you have probably seen the first part of that quote, but probably not the last half of that quote. Now, I am a big fan of studying history, and I'm a big fan of looking at quotes that important or influential people have said in the past, given whatever topic we may be looking at in particular. But I am honestly an even bigger fan of providing context, that if you just show up with a random quote with someone's picture, there's two things I think we need to do when you see someone's random quote just being shared around or thrown out there, whether it's in some email or it's a meme or someone shares it or whatever the case. The two things I think we must do is, one, verify the accuracy of the quote. Did that person in fact actually say that? And if we're talking about 18th century figures and things like that, we definitely need to try to find some kind of provenance or documentation or something showing that is a real, actual quote. And maybe the technology at the time, there was no video or audio recordings or speeches or anything that has verifiable recording. At least something that is verifiably attributed to that person. And the second thing that we need to do is understand the context. Randomly doing a drive-by ambush with a random quote, even if it is in our favor, doesn't necessarily help us if we don't understand the context in which that quote was said. And I think if we understand the context, it might help us better understand where it came from. And that's kind of a side note. But going back to the quote, but if someone has a gun and is trying to kill you, it would be reasonable to shoot back with your own gun. Not at the head, where a fatal wound might result, but at some other body part, such as a leg, end quote. Who said that? When was that said? In what context was that said? Well, we know for a fact that was said by the Dalai Lama, Tibetan monk, and actually this is pre-9/11, but 2001, and he was traveling to the United States at a university in Oregon. Pre-9/11, but this is also in the pretty fresh wake of the Columbine shooting that was still on everybody's mind at that time. That was, of course, this huge event. Something like that had never been done before. And unfortunately, we would see scenes like that would play out later as the years would go on, which probably needs its own almanac about active shooters and kind of how that works out and the challenges that we face with that all the time. But the students, they were going over an active shooter or a potential active shooter situation, and that's what he responded with. Now, most of you have probably seen the first part of his quote. But if someone has a gun and is trying to kill you, it would be reasonable to shoot back with your own gun. And that's probably all that most people have seen. But he went on to say, not at the head, where a fatal wound might result, but at some other body part, such as a leg. Now, to me, it's kind of a 50-50 reaction, at least me, personally. And I think half of it is spot on, and the other half is clearly said by somebody, probably with well-meaning intentions, especially the whole pacifist thing, and I get it, but probably said by someone who does not have a lot of training or proficiency or experience in real-world encounters, especially a lawful self-defense or a self-defense situation with firearms. So you have to take the good with the bad, and I do think we need to verify accuracy with quotes, and we need to understand the context in which they were said. But I think this is a good intro into this almanac, which is going to be all about some ideas regarding concealed carry. And this is actually an update to a 2013 video that I did on concealed carry. So this is, for some of you that have been asking me for a while, this is the long-awaited update to Concealed Carry Doctrine. There's two things beyond that I need to start with. Step number one is my background. I am an NRA certified range safety officer, rifle and pistol instructor. I did 5 years active duty in the United States Army as an 11 Bravo, an infantryman in a dismounted reconnaissance troop with deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and then also El Paso for the border mission. And yes, I was there, and actually down the street from where we were staying was a Walmart, which became international news while we were there, which is something we're going to get into. But in the end, I am just a dude on the internet, which leads me to my second point, that nothing you're about to hear and nothing you hear or have seen in any of my videos should ever be regarded as competent legal advice. I am literally just a guy who shoots and trains and owns guns, trains with them all the time, trains people, does a lot of training on my own. But I am just a dude on the internet. Nothing that you hear should be considered as competent, sound, confident legal advice. And for that, you're going to need to consult with a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I am not a defense attorney. I am not a prosecutor. I am not a judge. I am not a law enforcement officer or peace officer. I am literally just a dude on the internet. And nothing you hear or have seen in any of my videos, including this one, is anything. It should not be misconstrued as competent, sound legal advice. And I need to put that out there as a little disclaimer. And with all of that said, I think it's time that we can roll into the video. Now, for the first time, given the gravity of this topic at hand, I actually put several pages of notes so I can stay on target and cover the bases that I want to cover in this updated Concealed Carry Doctrine video. So with that said, welcome to the Almanack. I hope you have a nice drink going on, or you're busy working on something, or you're driving through traffic, whatever you got going on, and buckle up and let's get ready to go down the rabbit hole and into the weeds on this topic about all things concealed carry in terms of how it matters to us, and all kinds of angles on this that I think are the most important things to hit. So here we go. The first thing I would say is to get a concealed carry permit and get the training. Now, I've had, on the states I've lived in, I've had a Virginia concealed carry permit, a Louisiana concealed carry permit, and a Utah concealed carry permit. I do not believe that we are ever quite done learning. I don't believe that we have all the answers. I don't believe that you can ever reach some kind of situation where you know everything on a subject and we're done. We don't have to do any concurrent training. We don't have to go to new instructional or training courses or classes or things we've never taken before because we know everything. I don't believe in that. I believe we are always learning. I believe you should learn something every day, and I believe when it comes to firearms and the use of firearms, especially in a defensive, lawful self-defense kind of capacity, I feel like there is no such thing as too much training. And some courses you're going to find a lot of value out of, and you're going to learn a lot of new things, or at least things to think about. Maybe some courses, most of it will cover things that you've already been taught or things you've already been familiar with or learned about. But regardless, every time I take some kind of training course, I always learn something new. And every concealed carry permit that I've gotten, every time I've done the state mandated training to get the concealed carry permit, I've always learned something new. And I'm always going to advocate for that. Not just from a training aspect and learning more new things aspect, but also from a legal side. We have states like Arizona and Alaska and others where they have constitutional carry, where you actually do not need to obtain a concealed carry permit in order to lawfully conceal carry in that state. There are some states like that. And I would still urge people to go out of your way to go get the training. Go attend the classes, the courses, whether your state has just a classroom portion, whether it has that, but also an on-the-range qualification portion. There's going to be a qualified, credentialed concealed carry instructor that is going to be teaching it, and they're going to have some very interesting and pertinent things to say when it comes to regard to the law of that state. And I think that's the next thing that we need to talk about is you need to know and understand the laws of your local state and locality. There is no way that any video or podcast such as this can cover all bases when it comes to every single state. And even within those states, you have different county or city or locality or township or whatever it is. There's going to be laws that strictly and specifically pertain to you, that you fall under the purview of, as opposed to residents of a different state where the laws are slightly different. And we're going to get into some of those differences that I think matter the most. But the bottom line is know the law, understand it, and understand, at least in your state, what is lawful when it comes to the concept of concealed carry. And it's more just beyond where you can or cannot carry. It's also about, do we have an obligation to escape versus do we have a stand your ground statute in place? There are so many modifiers involved here, and the bottom line is to know and best understand the laws of your local state and or locality, because there's no way that anybody on the internet or any video can cover all bases. It is up to you, it is up to us as law-abiding citizens with a valid, lawful concealed carry permit. It is up to us to understand the laws and the statute of the land in which we live. The next thing, kind of going back on the concept of getting a permit, is there are certain people like me, whether you're former military, retired military, whatever the case may be, that if you move to a brand new state or maybe in the state that you live, that there's an exemption. Oh, if you have, retired military ID card, if you have military experience, if you show us a copy of your DD-214, which is your service record, if you show us a valid active duty or reserve component military ID, then you get exempt from having to take the standard concealed carry class that everyone else has to take. So if you just pay the fee and provide us that documentation, then you're all set. I still advise military personnel to still go through the training that regular Joe Blow civilian goes through. An example being, which is a rather personal example, is we had just gotten back from Afghanistan. It was 2016. We had just gotten back, and I had a whole bunch of dudes in my company that knew I was the gun guy. And they knew that, hey, I just turned 21 over deployment. I want to buy a handgun. I want to get into concealed carry. I want to start doing this. And it was even older guys that had not gotten around to it yet, but they wanted it. And they wanted to get their concealed carry. And they're like, oh, I've heard like if I provide a copy of my, CAT card or my active duty military ID or my service records, whatever, then I can get an exemption with the state of Louisiana and I can just get the permit. And my thing was, yes, that's true. And I'm going to be taking everyone's names down. I'm going to be organizing this with the sheriff of our parish or county who taught concealed carry on the side. And we're going to get to that. But if you're going to be doing it through me, and I'm going to be organizing this for all of us to go get the training to get concealed carry permits for the state of Louisiana, the only way I'm doing it is all of you are going through the regular Joe Blow civilian instruction. And that is the only way I'm doing this. The reason for that is, we just got out of Nangarhar province, Afghanistan. We just came off 9 months time in the combat zone as infantrymen. And now we are back in civilian life, and certain things or rules of engagement or escalation of force, there are some similarities, but the bottom line is how things were going on a daily basis in the combat zone is not necessarily what we're not going to take that mindset into civilian life. Maybe perhaps not all of it, but there's a lot of it that only applies in the combat zone, on the global war and terror in Afghanistan or Iraq. And there are certain things that do not necessarily apply in civilian life. And I think you need to be made aware of the laws, the statute, the jurisdiction, the things that matter, and kind of some conceptual ideas with lawful self-defense, at least as a regular dude with a concealed carry permit in society, in public, versus on a machine gun climbing the mountains of Afghanistan and dealing with that. So the bottom line is to say is, yes, you do have, if you are military, active duty, retired military ID, DD-214, whatever, there's a lot of states that offer either lower cost, or they offer, you don't have to take the training, just pay us the fee and we'll issue you the permit. And I would still advise for people to go seek the training regardless, even if you have the exemption. And again, first of all, because there's no such thing as being exposed to too much training. And secondly, the mindset or SOPs or rules of engagement or things that you are used to dealing with overseas may not necessarily, and a lot of that may not work out in your favor in civilian life. It's going to be oranges and apples, quite honestly. So that's kind of a side note that I believe in. And the next thing is, I got my first concealed carry permit when I turned 21. It's like right afterwards. And this is when I was living in Virginia. And that opened my eyes and changed how I decided to act and conduct myself in public. And it was an eye-opening experience. And even today where I work, we'll have concealed carry classes and all the students go through all the training. And by the end of the day, they leave with all the paperwork and everything they need to mail it off to the state and send out the money and apply for the concealed carry with the state. We are a shall issue state, meaning that if you pass all the requirements and you have a clean background check, then you shall be issued a permit. It's not up to someone to decide if you really need your Bill of Rights or not. But there are some people who finish the class, and after they've been exposed to all the responsibilities and all the potential legal repercussions and all of their individual responsibilities in the eyes of the law and ethically, morally, what they are charged with as a concealed carry permit holder, and the idea or concept of carrying a firearm in public for the purposes of lawful self-defense, and they've been exposed to all these ideas and laws and concepts, they will finish the class with the paperwork in hand, and they will decide, you know what, now that I know what I know, you know what, I don't know if I'm really ready for this yet, or I don't know if I really want to commit to that. And I think no less of those people say, hey, I respect the people who have a good foundational understanding of themselves, people who know their limitations and know their strengths and weaknesses, and people who honestly look at themselves in the mirror and say, you know what, now that I kind of know everything, or I've been exposed to everything, I don't think this is something I necessarily want to do. And I think that kind of aha moment, that kind of wake-up call, that introduction to all of these things that we're going to discuss, I think is necessary. And I would always urge people to do it. Yes, even military. And it's not just the whole, we just came off a combat deployment. We probably need to understand how things work in the civilian world with a concealed carry and carrying a gun in public, stateside. But they also, another thing that is true, and I don't care what anybody says, if you ask your average military person, whether you have a brother, a friend, an uncle, whoever you know, that has spent time in the United States military or has spent time or is in the military, and you ask them, hey, do people generally know how to use weapons and firearms in the military? The answer is going to be no. All right. We actually had a lot of soldiers that the first time that they ever fired a gun was in basic training with their M4 carbine. We had people that they didn't even own guns, and the only time they went shooting was when we would have an M4 range or a machine gun range, or we would do actual training throughout the month. That was their exposure. That was their version of, I'm going to go shoot, and it's only with the Army because I don't own my own guns. There are people who have indeed negligent discharges. There are people who have done some crazy stuff that are in uniform that do not have the proficiency that I think Joe Public or we the people might expect or assume of the United States military. And by the way, that also goes for law enforcement, but that's kind of its own little side note. But just because they got a badge, or just because they got a uniform, just because they have, on paper they have some kind of basic training or familiarization or department or military mandated basic training with firearms of some degree, that does not mean they are John Wick. That does not also necessarily mean that they have a cool head or what we would call ice in the veins, just the ability to act and to not panic or get all choked up or freeze or have issues or not knowing what to do when, quite frankly, the shit is hitting the fan and people are dying or whatever is going on. Just because someone has a badge or a uniform, or at least on paper some kind of competency or training, does not necessarily mean they are John Wick. And I would just want to dispel that from the start. If there was anybody who was under that impression, I think cops and military, if they were being honest with you in private, they will tell you, yeah, there are some people that I would not want to be in a foxhole with, or there are some people that are not going to be a functional member of society in a firefight. And that's just how it is. Sorry, there it is. So that's also why I encourage, even for military personnel where you are exempt from having to do the civilian training, I would still urge you to do it. And I hope that makes sense. I think most of you can understand where I'm coming from on this. So, real quick, going back to something I said, the difference between a shall issue and a may issue state. Now, in preparation for this video, I did re-listen to my original Concealed Carry Doctrine video from just about 7 years ago, and I'm happy to say I did mention Illinois was the only state at that time that did not have concealed carry permits at all, and that has since changed. Every state in the union has either constitutional carry or most commonly at least some kind of permit, but there are still some may issue states. And a shall issue state, like I discussed, that is a state that as long as you have a clean background and you pass all the state mandated training to get the permit, then they shall issue you the permit. They cannot deny you because they don't feel like it or because they don't like civilians having guns or whatever the case may be. And then you have places like California, where I escaped from, that are may issue states. And we have some interesting cases going through. Potentially might end up at Supreme Court. I've had some interesting stuff, even at the Ninth Circuit Court of all places. But at the end of the day, we still have the existence of may issue states. And that is where you can have a clean background and go through all the flaming hoops that they want you to go through. They might backlog your application for a couple years and just kind of sit on it, or just kind of feed you, quite frankly, bullshit, or push your stuff away. And then they may decide whether they actually want to issue you the permit or not. And that's kind of where we are at. In recent years, there's been talk of passing some kind of national concealed carry reciprocity bill where, I don't know, in the words of one of our founding fathers, full faith and credit could be established and provided from the credentials or permits from one state could be honored in another state. We are not currently in February of 2020. That is not where we exist, and there's debates on the side between the 10th Amendment and states' rights versus the federal government, and is this going to work? But if you have a conceptual idea of a driver's license issued in one state where you could go on this really awesome road trip across all of these states, and at least that state is going to recognize your license to drive a motor vehicle on the public roadways, or if you get married in one state and you have a marriage license and then you move to another state with your spouse and suddenly that state, decides they are not going to recognize your marriage because it didn't happen in their state. We don't have to worry about those things with driver's licenses, marriage licenses. There's some other things involved there. But with concealed carry, we do. And it is that way at this current moment in time, which leads to the next point, which is that if you are going to drive or fly or visit other states, you're going to travel through the union, interstate travel, and you're going to be going to different places. One thing you're going to want to do, and I do it every time, is the permits or permit that I have. I am going to research the different states of how many states I can fill in on the map that honor my concealed carry permit. And some states will offer resident versus non-resident concealed carry permits. Some states, if you have a resident permit, more states are going to accept that versus a non-resident permit. You may not get as many states. And quite frankly, there's no way to say this other than it is a mess in terms of the different permits, resident versus non-resident. in terms of, what states are willing to honor which permits, and does one state do the training that another state has to do, and do they deem the training valuable enough to the point that they're going to have a reciprocal agreement. So all of this is to say that if you were going to go on an awesome road trip, or you're going to be flying or traveling to other states in the Union, and you have a number of permits, or even just one permit that the state that you're in, you are going to want to make sure that not only that your permit is recognized in your states that you are going to be driving through or traveling to, but you're also going to want to pay a little bit of attention to the individual laws of that state. That maybe if I drive through Texas, that my Utah and Louisiana and Virginia permits, maybe all of those are recognized in that state, but while I am in that state, they have their own special list of places I can or cannot carry. They have their own policies when it comes to potentially drinking alcoholic beverages while carrying a gun. Some states have laws that say that if you are carrying a firearm concealed in public lawfully with a concealed carry permit, that you cannot have even one drink of alcohol. And honestly, that is what I practice. You will not see me carry guns or get behind the wheel of a car, even if I've had one sip. You just won't see that happen. There are and that's more of a matter of personal preference and personal policy. You will see some states that will say, okay, it's fine if you want to have a couple beers or whatever while you're carrying, but you cannot exceed the legal limit to drive while you are carrying a firearm. You cannot be, above the blood alcohol content, whatever. So it's not enough to simply know what states will honor your permit, whether you have a resident or a non-resident permit for a given state, but it's also on top of that, you should understand the different local or state laws of the states you are traveling through, of what they dictate. That maybe in your state it's okay to carry a gun concealed in an alcohol serving establishment so long as you don't sit at the bar and you sit in the main room of the restaurant, in the booths or the tables, not at the bar alcohol serving area, versus going to another state where you cannot even enter an alcohol serving establishment at all with a concealed firearm. There's all kinds of nuances and intricacies, and it all changes depending on what state you are traveling to. So just kind of finalizing that point, it's not simply enough to know which states will honor your permit, but it's also, you need to understand the intricate, simple little facts of what is different about that state while you are visiting and lawfully carrying in their state, and making sure you are still doing it lawfully, and any nuances or interesting things that they may have in that state that you're traveling to. So I just wanted to make sure that was something that we talked about, or that you were aware of if you were already not. So the next thing is, I think generally, if you have a concealed carry permit, or you are carrying a firearm in public for the purposes of lawful self-defense, I think it all boils down to this. And it's a question that I ask myself. It's a question that I ask other people, or at least think about. And that is, are we inherently an asset to ourselves and public safety, or are we a hazard? It's almost like a teeter-totter, or just a balance or a scale. Are we more of an asset to ourselves and public safety, or are we more of a hazard to us or potentially everyone around us? And that comes with training, that comes with competency, and that comes with some of the things that we are going to be discussing here. But the bottom line is, when we are carrying a firearm in public for the purposes of lawful self-defense, we've got the training, we've got a permit, we're doing our thing, going about our day, I always ask that question: am I being an asset to myself and public safety right now, or am I just being a mess and, quite frankly, just a shit show? Don't have the training, don't have the competency, I'm doing something unsafe, I'm not being a positive influence to myself or public safety in general. Am I being more of a hazard or am I more of an asset? And that is always kind of the resounding question in the back of my mind of everything that I do on a daily basis and how I go about my business throughout my day. That's always something I think about, and I would urge you to think of that as well as we move on through these topics. The next thing I want to talk about is the, air quotes, the right attitude. And first, I'm going to open this topic by saying that I generally, at least where I live now, and it's not always been this way when I lived in Los Angeles, when I've lived in city areas, I've lived in different states across the country, but at least where I live now, I generally think, and this is something we get from the anti-gun people, or the people who maybe they're not anti-gun, but they don't understand why somebody would get a concealed carry permit or why they would feel the need to do so, or what are you worried about? Are you worried about ISIS jumping out of a bush and suddenly trying to kill you or something? Are you paranoid? Are you like, what's your deal? And I mean, quite frankly, lawfully carrying a firearm that I am well trained and well practiced with, and I know how to use it, and I know I've got a good head on my shoulders. I'm doing this for the right reasons. Quite frankly, I'm not worried about a damn thing. So it's not, and that's not to be overconfident, and that's not to be egotistical. That's just to say that if we are trying to be painted as some kind of ultra-paranoid contingent of civilians who, only the ultra-paranoid or scared or terrified people are going to go out there and try to get a concealed carry permit. No, some of us have actually lived in the real world, that we did not have the luxury of living in gated communities, or we lived in inner city areas, or we've lived in places or during times, maybe the LA riots, Northridge earthquake, different things that were going on in certain places and times where, this is how the rest of us have to live in normal communities. And maybe we're not millionaires. Maybe we don't have the best income. We're not living in gated communities or these really nice places. And maybe there's some stuff going on in our city or in our neighborhood that give us reasonable concern that we should, maybe we should take a rational, logical step towards our own self-preservation and safety. Also with a note of, being prepared. But I view society, at least the one that I live in at this moment, I actually think the vast majority of people that if I'm going about my errands, I'm doing my thing, I'm out in the public space, doing whatever it is I'm doing, I generally believe that most people around me, at least in this society, are generally good people. And if my wallet was to drop out of my pocket or something, I generally think either people would say, hey, sir, you dropped your wallet, like, hey, this happened, whatever. Or at least at a bare minimum, I tend to think that most people around me would at least, maybe they're not going to, be a hero and step up out of their way to help me. And that's a whole different thing of, bringing on personal risk to help others that you don't even know, which is something that may show up in this podcast as we go on. Maybe they're not going to step up to the occasion to overtly help me, but at least I have a relative confidence in the fact that I think most of the people surrounding me, at least in the society and the culture that I live in, the area that I'm at, I think most people are at least not out to get me. At least would not attempt to take advantage of any mistake or any drop in my wallet or whatever it is. Now, at the same time, I like to think good thoughts from what I observe and think good thoughts from what I'm seeing, bases, compared to a relative perception of the people who are probably around me in at least the culture or society or city that I live in. But at the end of the day, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what is necessarily going on. And if I'm at a store, checking out at the register, buying my stuff, I don't necessarily know who is next to me in line. I don't necessarily know who is around me in public at any given moment. And there's always kind of that factor where it's like, I generally think, at least the society I live in, that most people are at least good-natured, or at least at a bare minimum, they're not out to get me. But at the same time, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who these people are. I don't know the person next to me in line at the cash register. I don't know who's with me in public. And I don't know who might show up. Maybe they are or are not necessarily from the area. And I don't necessarily know who is around me and what their motivations are and what is going on. And at least for me, from a practical standpoint, from a logical, practical standpoint, the way that I am viewing at least the utility factor behind a concealed carry permit and having a firearm on me in public, concealed for the purposes of lawful self-defense, I look at that from a utilitarian standpoint and a preparedness standpoint, much like I view the fire extinguisher in my home. I'm not wanting there to be a fire. I don't want some kind of fire in my kitchen. I don't want something happening. But if there was a kitchen fire or something happened, whatever, then yeah, I have a fire extinguisher and I know how to use it. I don't want to use it. But no, I also don't think the fire department are the only people on planet Earth who can successfully put out a fire, a small kitchen fire, before it becomes a massive building fire. And I also view the concealed carry permit and the firearm on me concealed in public for the purposes of lawful self-defense. I also view it from a utilitarian preparedness standpoint as the spare tire in my car. Where no, I'm not trying to get a flat tire. I don't want to blow a tire on the freeway. I don't want to have issues, but I understand that despite my best efforts in keeping up with maintenance and keeping up with stuff and paying attention to things, I understand that sometimes things may happen. And if I have a flat tire on the side of the road, I have a spare tire and I have the tools needed and the jack and everything to take care of that myself. And I don't necessarily believe that you have to be a tow truck driver to properly change a tire on the side of the road. I believe that is something I am totally capable and able and should be doing on my own. And again, I'm not wanting that situation to happen, but if, despite my best efforts, it should be the reality that I am facing at any given moment, if it does happen, then yeah, I have a spare tire, I have the tools, I have the know-how, and I know how to change that tire myself on the side of the road. And you don't necessarily have to be an actual tow truck driver to come to the rescue and do that in the immediate aftermath of, wow, I have a flat tire and I need to figure out what to do about this. So that may seem like a foreign concept to our anti-gun opponents, or maybe people that are not necessarily anti-gun, they're not pro-gun, they're just kind of in the middle, they're not really sure, they don't know yet, they're seeking information. And that's the best thing I could say is, I carry a firearm in public with a concealed carry permit for the purposes of lawful self-defense, not because I'm wanting a fight. I'm the last person on earth who wants to go back to some kind of situation like that. I'm not trying to deal with a lethal scenario in my own country, stateside, when I'm just trying to be a civilian now and just go about my errands and live my peaceful life. I don't want that stuff to happen. That's not what I want. But if, despite my best efforts, I am facing a situation, I know my own skill sets. I have the equipment and the skills and the preparedness ready to deal with that situation if, despite my best efforts, I am facing that kind of scenario, if that makes sense. And that is probably, at least for me personally, that is the best way to convey why I conceal carry. I'm not worried about ISIS jumping out of a bush and trying to kill me or something. There are reasonable observations about the world in which we live in. There are reasonable understanding and knowledge base of what happens or what can happen out there. I generally think the people around me, at least in where I'm living now, generally good people, or at least they're not out there to get me or try to take advantage of something. But I don't know. And I would like to just go about my business in peace and have a peaceful, functional society where we can all run our errands and go about our days and go to work and everything is fine and live with our families and do all of that in peace. That's what I want. But I understand it's an imperfect world and things do happen, and should they happen, whether it's a fire in my house, whether it's a spare, the tire goes out in my car on the side of the road, whether it's some kind of imminent lethal situation, all of these last-ditch scenarios that I did not want, and despite my best efforts, this is what I'm facing. I'm going to have the equipment and the skills and the training and the things on hand and ready and accessible to deal with that situation at the lowest level, or at least whatever personal actions I can take to positively affect change in this horrible situation that I find myself in. And again, going back to that question, are we an asset to ourselves and public safety? Or are we not doing the right things? We don't have enough training. We're not taking it seriously. We're not looking at this as a real responsibility and a big deal. And now we have become more of a hazard to ourselves or public safety. Always questions to keep in mind. At least I do with everything that I'm doing. Now, I think going back to the perception value, there is that perception that, oh my God, somebody who has a concealed carry permit or has a gun in public, they might be paranoid or crazy or worried about, whatever, or they might be, they're trying to be Billy Badass and they're trying to go out there and, be the hero that saves the day. There are some perceptions, especially the not gun owning side of our society, might have on us. And I'm here to tell you, at least in my personal circumstance, and with pretty much everybody I work with and people that I've observed and know over the years, that we're not in this to be some kind of John Wick badass vigilante hero. And that's the next thing. I am not a cop. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a peace officer. And I'm not trying to be. It's not my job to enforce the law. And that's not what I'm trying to do. What I am simply trying to do is go about my business in peace, be patient and kind to anybody I meet, treat people with respect and dignity, just go about my business, run my errands, go to work, meet up with family, do my thing, and come home at the end of the night alive to my family. That's my goal. I'm not out there to be some Billy Badass. I'm not out there to, show the world something. I'm not out there to be a vigilante or enforce the law. That's not my job. My job is to go about my business in peace and have a successful, safe, happy day and come home at the end of the night and just live my life. That is inherently my objective. And I think the perception value gets a little skewed, especially with how certain politicians or people want to paint us. And most often and almost exclusively, these are people who don't have concealed carry permits or they don't own guns. They're not part of this. They don't understand the things that we live every day, and maybe they live in a nice, cushy, gated community, or they have, if they're a public figure, maybe they have armed guards who protect them 24 hours a day. They have the budget or the public figure status to, allow for that. And then there's the rest of us, we the people who have to live in the different places we live, and we are just trying to do what we need to do to take reasonable, logical, rational steps of preparedness, and always just keeping our eyes open and seeing what's going on. It doesn't mean that we're paranoid. It doesn't mean we're crazy. It doesn't mean we're looking for a fight, because I most certainly am not. It just means that we observe the world in which we live in. We understand that we don't have 24-hour, private security details, and yes, with semi-automatic weapons. We don't have that kind of luxury. We're the other half, if you will. We the people, the regular person that has to live in this society as a normal, just nobody. And we are just trying to go about our business. So for anybody who may not understand that concept, I just want to introduce that, at least as a personal anecdote of why I carry and kind of what led me to this conclusion based on the rational observations and a logical approach. Okay, well, this is the world I live in, so what are the reasonable, rational, logical steps that I'm going to take to be prepared in case a situation finds itself in my lap that I wanted nothing to do with, and despite my best efforts, it is here. What am I going to do to deal with this situation so I can accomplish the mission, which for me is to go about my business in peace and come home safely at the end of the night. So that is something I wanted to clear up just from the start. So now, before we get into the actual mechanics of holsters and guns and things like that, the last conceptual thing that I'm going to present to you is something that I've changed my mind on over the years. Back in my original video, it was in line with something that you probably hear all the time, which is this idea that, conceptually, you have the sheep and they don't mean any harm, but they have no capability to defend themselves, and that is standard people in public who are not aware, they are totally oblivious, they don't have guns or training or anything on them, and they're just trying to live their lives in peace. They don't mean harm to anybody, but in some kind of threat or some kind of situation, they are sheep. And they are, effectively worthless for their own self-defense or self-preservation. And then you'll hear it sold, but then there's the wolves. And the wolves are the bad guys. And the wolves are the guys who, insert, active shooter or whatever it is, somebody that does have some kind of weapons, and definitely there's always at least a bare minimum of the willingness to use weapons or physical force or violence on normal, regular people, innocent victims, to achieve whatever goals they want to achieve, whether it's to rob a convenience store and get money, to get goods. Maybe there's a sexual predator, or they are some kind of resource predator. There is some kind of angle to this. Maybe this is the day that they decide to go to a certain location that is notoriously undefended, or an easy, fish in a barrel kind of scenario. And today is the day they are going to absolutely do something horrific. And those are the wolves. But then we have us, the concealed carry guys, the sheepdogs, that we don't want trouble. But we are here to protect ourselves and the flock of sheep from the wolves, and we keep the wolves away. There's lots of debate, lots of talk. You'll often hear it talked about in this kind of context or in these kinds of parameters, and maybe it's my time overseas, and maybe it's my collective experiences. Whatever it is, I'm here to tell you that I do have kind of a thought change on this, whereas I used to believe in that, and I guess maybe the older I get, I'm only 30 years old, but just from personal exposure and just a matter of personal theory and opinion, which is not fact, just again, one dude on the internet and my ideas on this topic at hand, I actually tend to think that if you were to break down society in this kind of context, I think probably and perhaps more accurately, you are going to have sheep and you are going to have wolves. And that's it. I'm just keeping it real. Just from personal observation and a matter of my opinion changing over the years based on different experiences, I think you have sheep and you have wolves. And the sheep are just as described, and that's not... I think some people might mean that in a derogatory term, and I actually do not. I don't mean to label we the people and standard civilians who are just trying to do the right thing and go about their day in peace, and they just want safety and just want to do their thing and be kind to others and stuff. When in this context, when I label them sheep, I'm not meaning that they are mindless or whatever kind of connotation might be intentionally attached to that phrase, maybe coming from other sources. I'm actually talking about something a little bit more particular that I've taken note to over the years, which is what I call a capacity for chaos, a capacity for violence. And when we focus on the wolves category of the equation, I have shifted kind of to the mindset that with wolves, it just depends what team we are playing on. Because you have wolves, the stereotypical example I just mentioned of evil people that have an indoctrination or an exposure or a comfort level with violence, that they have been exposed to it. They're used to seeing it. They're used to using it. They're used to being immersed in that kind of violent, chaotic atmosphere as a matter of course. They are no strangers to it. And they are willing to use that, whether it's conditioning or indoctrination or comfort level with being exposed or familiar with or engaged in violent activities or in that kind of atmosphere. They are willing to use all of that for the purposes of evil, whether it's robbing someone, raping people, taking money, just killing people in the public square, whatever it is, essentially they are using their capabilities for evil purposes. And on the other side of the coin, you have professionals, whether they are combat arms military, they are law enforcement in inner cities or SWAT team people, or, private citizens who have a willingness to fight when it is needed in a self-defensive kind of scenario. But I think you have wolves working on both sides, and it just, to me, is a matter of what team are they playing on. Is this someone who has the ability and the willingness to utilize violence, but they're doing it for evil purposes? Or on the good side of the house, are we willing to use our experience and our capabilities and our talents, if you will, for good, to protect rather than to destroy, to help rather than harm? And I think that's, maybe this is all nuance or semantics. We can call whatever categories of society in this context that we want to label it. We want to have fancy, cool words for things or whatever. But whereas I used to believe in this sheep and sheepdog and wolf concept, and maybe that's the easiest way with shapes and colors and things to describe it to other people, I am of the opinion, based on, I guess, more recent experiences in my life, in my mid to late 20s, moving into where I am now, that to me, I think it's a matter of you got the sheep and you got the wolves, and it's just a matter of which side are the wolves playing on, what team are we on. And that's more, again, that could be semantics. That could be, there's a million ways to do this. There's a million ways to try to describe how we want to convey the message. But at the bottom line is you have people, and this starts to move more into active shooters or mass killers. And I'm thinking more along the lines of whether it's the Sandy Hook situation, the Columbine killers, Oklahoma City, whoever or whatever it is. If you look at our society and you look at the people that we cherish and the people we respect and the people that are go-getters, the people who are A-type personalities, the people who work 90 hours a week and they barely sleep because they're always working hard and they're always studying, they're always trying to improve themselves and learn more and do more and fight harder. You might find characters like perhaps maybe Elon Musk. Someone who is always getting after it, who is always working hard, who is very studious, who is always making great efforts and always pushing the envelope on his own capabilities and things that he is able to do, and always trying to increase productivity and positive change and trying to do more. And they are obsessed with it. Have you ever known people that they have a kind of personality where they are just go-getters, and whatever the task is, whether it's, go graduate college, or, I'm going to be the best baseball player at my high school, I'm going to be whatever, and they put themselves on a self-motivated mission to be better and strive harder. And these are the people that are out there at the baseball field practicing till the sun goes down. These are people who are studying. They got their head in the book. These are people who are out there at the gym just getting after it. These are people, in the martial arts world that are getting on the mat every day, and they're just increasing. They're going to more training, they're doing more stuff. We know people like that in society, and then when they're doing positive things, we cherish them, we respect them, we admire them. These are people to emulate. These are people that are just always pushing the envelope on, and they're always working hard, and they're always doing, improving themselves and improving their own game and fighting hard and putting in the work and burning the midnight oil to just get better at their thing that they're doing. I think we all know or can point to people like that. But my question to the audience becomes, what makes you think that those kinds of people are not on the other side of society, where you have people who are always pushing the envelope to do good things and improve their game, improve their capabilities, learn more, do more, be better, and they're putting in the work, they're putting the reps in, they're burning the midnight oil to be better and do better. What makes you think these people do not exist on the other side of life, the evil side of life? And that's kind of a side note. I think there is some kind of perception, especially if you see some kind of, surveillance camera footage at a convenience store or a bank or something, with some criminal going in there with some half-cocked plan to rob the bank, and then they try to leave, and they don't, in the panic of the moment, they don't realize the door, you have to pull the door to open it, so they're shoving on the door trying to escape when all they would have to do is pull on it. Or you see these different footage or instances where criminals do some kind of half-cocked plan that does not go the plan, and they easily get arrested or whatever the case. And I think there's some kind of perception that, all criminals are just dumb and they're stupid and they don't plan out some kind of attack, or they don't plan out some kind of robbery, or they don't really put a lot of effort or timing or whatever into their stuff. And again, what makes you think they are all like that? And if you have A-type go-getter personalities on the positive side of life, then what makes you think they do not also inherently exist on the evil side of life? And unfortunately, we see this, so in the examples are plenty. Whether it's the Oklahoma City bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing, even the 9/11 hijacking and an attack and everything, there are people who are willing to be patient, and they are willing to study, and they are willing to wait, and they are willing to rationally, even though it's evil, they are willing to lay out their objectives and accomplish the goals that they set for themselves to perpetrate some kind of evil, horrific attack on innocent people. And that moves more into the active shooter situation. And I think one big thing that I'm glad to see is being talked about more, and there's more training for this. There's kind of more awareness since I originally put out my original Concealed Carry Doctrine video, but a lot of it comes down to mindset. And this chiefly involves whether it's a personal attack or whether it's a personal self-defensive kind of situation, or whether it's an active shooter, you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. Despite your best efforts, this is your life now, and this is what's happening. I think I'm very happy to see that there is more focus on the mindset to fight, and not simply to cower or to hide or to run and just let people die while you get out of there. And this is something we're going to talk about. But there is more of an emphasis on the fight. And if we study these examples of school shooters or active shooters or public attacks, and you look at this from a constructive and again, I can't help but use my military mind to look at this as a complex ambush or an organized attack. But when you look at the task and purpose of what this was about and what were the expectations, the expectations were for these people, okay, we're going to roll in, we're going to be the top dogs, we're going to have the most firepower, we're going to have a place that is notoriously unarmed and defenseless, that's why we chose the location, and we are going to commit our evil and do our thing, and opposition is not part of the plan. We're not expecting to see someone with a gun or law enforcement immediately on the spot. We're not expecting to have resistance or armed opposition to our evil plans. That is not part of the program. That is not part of the plan. That's why we chose this venue, this time, place, day, whatever. And that is a unfortunately common theme that we see in these public shootings, these active shooters, these public attacks, that opposition and armed resistance is not part of the plan. The plan is to go into a defenseless venue where they are free to do the evil, horrible shit that they are going to do. And part of their plan is to have no opposition for as long as possible. And what happens often? Either the shooters or attackers will kill themselves once cops are arriving, or they finally get put down by someone with a gun, whether it's law enforcement or someone else who happened to be there. That is generally what we see in this kind of circumstance. And as a more recent matter of recent events, the Texas church shooting, where we had one guy, it wasn't just one who had a gun in there, but it was a church in Texas where someone came in and they decided to start cutting loose and unloading. And I imagine part of his plan was probably to go to a venue or a place of worship where generally, or at least he would suspect, that people would not have firearms or have no way of dealing with the superior firepower that he brought into that venue. And he has free reign to do the evil, horrible shit that he is going to do. And opposition is not part of the plan. And maybe someone's going to run and call 911 and the cops will eventually show up. But by the time they show up, I'm already going to kill myself and it's not going to be an issue. I suspect that was part of the plan, unfortunately, as we see all too frequently in these kinds of attacks or active shooting scenarios, where that is generally the task and purpose and the templated mission of what these people are trying to do. What was not part of the plan was a guy on the spot who also happened to be a firearms instructor, someone who trained often and constant all the time, who pulled out his firearm and realized that he had a very judicious shot he had to place, given how much innocent life was also in the field of view and tightly compact in the area. And immediately, before more killing or death or mayhem could occur, a regular dude with a concealed carry permit and a firearm pulled out the gun and fought. He chose to fight. And that is something that I am glad to see has become more prevalent, more talked about, more common, but is the attitude, the right attitude, the attitude to fight. Because opposition, especially armed opposition, is not part of the plan. That's not part of the intended plan of how, in their minds, they want this to go. That's why they choose a venue they think to be unarmed and defenseless. That's why they want to have a maximized amount of time to commit to their evil, horrible shit. Armed opposition in that instance is not part of the plan. That's not part of what they are envisioning, how they want this to go. Certainly people who are willing to fight and oppose them is not also part of the plan. And again, I'm glad to see that has kind of gotten picked up in the mainstream, and there's starting to be more training and there's more awareness about this concept, this right attitude, if you will, to fight. And not just the right attitude, but the right equipment and training to follow with it to make that attitude actually mean something in the moments, the very few moments you have to make something work for affecting a positive change. Again, going back to the idea, are we inherently an asset to ourselves and personal safety and public safety, or are we more of a hazard? And the gentleman in the Texas church who put down that shooter and stopped more people from dying and more horrible shit from happening, yes, he was absolutely an asset to public safety and everyone around him, given his skills, the seriousness or responsibilities that he personally took on by having the concealed carry permit, by having a gun that he was well trained and practiced with, by putting in the reps and training often, and being dedicated to being vigilant to simply what's going on around him and being willing to fight. And that cannot be overstated. So now that I've kind of laid at least pretty much all of the conceptual groundwork for this video, let's get into some of the more logistical or mechanical parts of this. And it's a question I get often, whether it's on YouTube here or in personal life or at work, of what is the best gun to carry for concealed carry? And quite simply, the answer to that, at least in my opinion, is the best gun in the world is the gun that you actually have on you and you know how to use and you are effective with. There you go. Not always a pleasing answer, because I think people sometimes are looking for a certain make or model or caliber or type of gun. And my answer is, it is absolutely the gun. The best gun in the world is the one that you have on you, that you know how to use, that you're well practiced with, that you're proficient with, and you're effective with. That is the best gun in the world for concealed carry. Now, for different people, that could mean different things. And ultimately, when we're looking at a concealed carry gun, there's certain things we need to take into account. Now, the gun itself, in my opinion, there are 3 factors that we really need to focus on when it comes to selecting the right firearm that we are going to lawfully carry concealed in public. The gun itself, I think, Objective or feature number one that is of most importance, I believe, is it needs to be a gun that is reliable. It needs to be a gun that is of a quality manufacturer. It is of a quality design. I tend to lean to guns that do have a service record, either with military, law enforcement, or it is a gun that has some kind of track record that we can tap into and we can observe that even in the worst case scenario, in battlefield conditions, austere environments, or whatever, if it's the line of duty for law enforcement, it is a quality gun that is reliable. And that's going to be my first objective, the most important feature of the gun is that it is reliable. Now, reliability, a lot of what's going to go into that is, yes, the quality and track record of the gun, the quality of the design, the quality of the materials of how the gun is actually made, everything from the heat treatment and the type of steel and coatings and everything. Another factor that is huge when it comes to reliability is the type or quality or kind of magazines that the gun is utilizing. That we're going with magazines that we have tested. They are tried and true, that we know they function in this gun. They are good to go. They're not bent or they're not damaged. They're not messed up. We know that they work and they're in great operational, serviceable condition. And thirdly, part of that is going to be ammunition selection, where you might have a really good gun that has a great track record. It's got a great reputation. It is a quality gun, but the ammunition that you have decided to use in that gun, or the ammunition you were trying to use in that gun, maybe it's the shape of the bullet, maybe it's the quality of the ammunition is suspect, maybe the ammunition was exposed to moisture and corrosion over time, which you should not shoot it. Maybe even it's quality new manufactured ammo, but the shape of the projectile makes it difficult for the gun to reliably feed it and load it. So, number one factor in a quality, reliable concealed carry gun is going to be, and this just goes for any gun that you would use, whether it's home defense, it's something you would use in the line of duty or overseas on the battlefield, or it's something you would just simply carry as a concealed carry gun. If you're asking me, priority number one of this gun is it needs to be reliable. And again, that's not just the gun. We're also looking at the magazines. We're looking at the ammunition selection. We're looking at doing the maintenance and making sure it's clean, making sure it's lubricated, making sure we're checking for any weird wear patterns or any damage or anything going on in the gun, that after we train and shoot with it, we're going to field strip it and clean it and make sure function check and everything is back the way it should be before we put it back to, after we put it back together and before we load it up for carry or defensive duty again. It needs to be reliable. The next thing on my priority list is it needs to be durable. And the reason why it needs to be durable is whether the gun, in some kind of real world scenario, that the gun gets dropped and you pick it up from the asphalt of the parking lot or the cement or whatever it fell on, and the gun, you can pick it up and you're still shooting and nothing broke. You didn't have something break off the gun or something, deadline the gun is what we would call it. It needs to be durable, not just for that, but mainly and chiefly because ideally you're going to be practicing with this gun all the time, which means you're putting a lot of rounds through the gun. It's probably, out of all the guns you own, it's going to be one of the high mileage or the most high wear, high firing schedule gun that you own because you're shooting it all the time. And if you have a gun that is well made, it is durable, it is a reputable manufacturer, it has a track record, the quality of the steel, the quality control at the factory, the reputation this company has in making guns, it is durable, not just to survive if it gets dropped or gets scratched up or gets banged on the side of a wall or whatever, but really and chiefly for constant, continual, concurrent practice. We need a gun that can put up with not just the conditions if something crazy was going on and you actually needed it, but mainly and chiefly just all of that concurrent routine training that you're going to be doing and all the rounds you're going to be putting through the gun. And that also requires us to be vigilant, where no matter how well made the gun is, after enough time, the recoil spring is going to need to be changed out. Maybe the magazines, if in your training you go attend a training course and the magazines get stepped on or whatever. Whatever happens, it is on us as the person operating it and carrying it and relying upon it for legitimate, lawful self-defense, and it just needs to go bang. It just needs to work. It needs to be reliable, both with our ammo and magazine selection, and it needs to be tested for the ammo and magazines, not just the reliability, but feeding and also the point of impact. If I'm doing my practice, full metal jacket, target ammunition for putting the reps in and training, and then I load up for actual carry, my jacketed hollow point loads. Is there a point of impact shift? I do find that semi-automatic pistols tend to have less, usually, of an impact shift, generally, as opposed to a wheel gun or a revolver of some kind, that they seem to, for some reason, be a little bit more susceptible to a point of impact shift. But regardless of whatever gun it is and whatever we're doing, we're checking the magazines, we're carefully selecting ammunition for both training and also carrying. We're going to be cleaning and maintaining and looking after the gun, as recoil springs and high wear service parts need to be changed out. We're staying on top of that, and it needs to be durable. That's point number 2, to survive all of the training and all of the shooting and all the high volume of training and reps that we're going to be putting through the gun. The last requirement I have is not 100% necessary, or it's probably, in my opinion, the least important if I had to assign importance to my 3 qualifiers for a legitimate concealed carry or defensive gun. But the last thing I have is, preferably, it needs to be simple. And if you're in some kind of lethal encounter and everything is going wrong and you're not even sure that you're going to be alive in the next 10 seconds, when you're facing that and what happens to your body in that kind of circumstance, and the changes, the physical, biological changes that happen to your body as the adrenaline and everything is pumping through your body, it is better to have a gun that is simple to operate. And I'm chiefly talking about a safe action or striker fired modern defensive or duty pistol. These are guns that are designed to be simple. They are not very complex in terms of how they operate. There's no levers and switches and decockers and manual safeties and crazy stuff going on. They are simple. They are easy to use. It's a very intuitive situation. You can even say like a modern double action revolver is also very simple. Either there's rounds in the cylinder and the cylinder is closed and it's ready to go, or it's not. Simple by way of just as an important factor is generally better, in my opinion, something that is simple. Now, if you choose to carry, let's say it's a Beretta M92 FS, or it's a 1911 pattern gun where there is a manual safety or there is a decocker, it's a double single action, there's other stuff involved here that make the gun a little bit more complex, and there's a little bit more training and reps you need to put in to confidently get that muscle memory to do it right every time. If you put in the reps and the training and you're willing to work with that gun, or you got, passed down this gun and it's a quality gun, but it's maybe not the simplest gun to use, but you're willing, this is all I have, and I don't have the budget to buy something newer or better. It still is a quality gun. There's just a little bit more complexity involved. Whatever the circumstances are, if you are willing to put in the training, you can greatly mitigate and pretty much just negate the downside of a gun that is a little bit more nuanced or has a little bit more features, or the battery of arms of how that gun works. If it's a double single action, it's got a decocker, it's got a manual safety, it's exposed hammer single action only. Whatever it is, you can negate the fact that it's not the most simple intuitive gun to use with more reps, more training, get professional, awesome training, go out there, get the reps, maybe do some local fun shoots or some IDPA or do some local 2-gun matches or whatever, just to boost up familiarization with the gun. But if you're willing to put in the reps, you don't necessarily need to have the most simple caveman gun in the world. I'm just saying that if you can, it is generally preferred, especially if you're the kind of person that you're working all the time, or you don't have as much budget when it comes to being able to get out at the range once a week or be able to get out there and actually shoot all the time. Simple is generally going to be better. But the 2 things I would never compromise on is, number 1, it needs to be reliable. We just need to know that it's going to go bang every time. And if it's an auto-loading semi-automatic pistol, we know it's going to function, it's going to feed, it's going to work. And then the second thing is it needs to be durable. It needs to be something that can survive all the rounds you're going to be putting through it, all the training you're going to be doing with it, and worst case scenario, in an actual moment, if it drops, it gets banged up, it falls on the concrete, whatever, you can pick it back up, and you know that it is a quality gun built to quality manufacture with great quality control, great metals and steel and everything, that the gun is going to still work, even if it has to go through something like that. And then lastly, yes, simple is better, but it's not necessarily required if you're willing to understand the gun and how it works and put in extra reps to really get that down confidently. You don't need to worry about simple as much, but that's all contingent on you. And again, we're talking about magazine selection. I would honestly stick with, let's say it's a Glock 19, let's say it's a Sig Sauer P320, let's say it's a Smith & Wesson M&P 9, let's say it's a Springfield XDM 9, whatever it is, I would just stick with the manufacturer's magazines. I would just stick with, most of the guns these days are coming with 2, sometimes 3 magazines. I would just stick with the quality factory branded original manufacturer quality magazines that are in serviceable condition. Now, there are aftermarket magazines. There's different companies that will make magazines for all kinds of guns, and the quality level goes up and down just depending on what it is and who made it and the quality and construction and design of the magazine. But if it's the magazine in your gun or it's the spare magazine that you're going to have on you or whatever it is, I would just straight up stick to the manufacturer's magazines, because they are generally, especially with a quality manufacturer, they are generally going to be the best it's ever going to get. So, touching back on ammo selection, generally speaking, what we are trying to do is train often, which means for training and target practice and attending training or putting the reps in and shooting on a casual or concurrent basis, we are generally going to be using target or range ammo, and chiefly we're going to be really talking about full metal jacket, where it's a lead slug covered in a jacket of copper of some kind, it's brass cased, it's good, reliable, functional ammunition. Now, I would not want to get shot with anything, and I would not want to get shot with full metal jacket, but it is not the most effective when we're talking terminal ballistics. It's not going to be the most effective ammunition that we could possibly select for actual carry every day. And generally, you will find, and it's a little bit more spendy for a reason, because they put more precise quality control. They have nickel-plated cases generally. They might have sealed primers, cantilevered bullets. Bullet construction is going to be different. Now we're moving into either a ballistic tip or a jacketed hollow point or a bonded jacketed bullet of some kind. Something that has a bullet construction that is more conducive to expansion and producing better terminal ballistics should it ever be needed. And for layman's terms, or if you're new to this, generally you will see, in Federal and Winchester do this, where on the box that says full metal jacket or target use, it'll say it on the box like, hey, this is for range and target and training. And then they'll have other boxes of ammo that are clearly marked for defensive ammunition use. And it actually has surprised me over the years how common, and I don't know why this is, but how common it is to find people carrying a gun that has full metal jacket rounds in the magazine. And I don't understand that. In the military, we had to use, like in my Beretta M9, overseas and everything, we had to use the 124 grain plus piece standard 9mm full metal jacket NATO 9mm ammunition by the Geneva Accords and everything. That is the only ammunition we could carry. We could not carry hollow points, couldn't do any of that. Stateside, whether it's law enforcement officers in the line of duty or it's concealed carry people and lawful citizens trying to protect their home, or a concealed carry ammunition selection, we can choose to use jacketed hollow points and ammunition that is much better and much more terminal ballistics wise. It is much more effective than simply just full metal jacket. And also that ammunition, again, it's going to have nickel-plated cases. Generally, you will find powders or propellants in those cartridges that are made to be high velocity but also low flash. So if you have to shoot at night, it's not going to be a huge fireball. The flash is mitigated. You're going to find ammunition that has a cantilever on the bullet, so it's got those lines right at the edge of the case. So if you have to constantly chamber and unchamber, load and unload the same defensive rounds, that it's going to reduce the chances that bullet is just going to get shoved into the casing and seated deeper. You're going to find features on defensive ammunition that are going to be more conducive to long-term reliability. And that's the next thing, is you're going to want to cycle out your defensive or carry loads. My policy is generally every 6 months at a maximum. I will have jacketed hollow points and defensive rounds that I will have and carry and use. And after about 4 to 6 months, that's when I'll go out to the range and I'll shoot it just to double, triple, quadruple check that it's functioning, it's cycling through the gun, and I'm checking the point of impact, making sure it's exactly where I remember it should be. And then I'll go ahead and just buy the same type of ammo, brand new, loaded up in the mags again, and that's what I'm carrying for the next 4 to 6 months. And then I'll download the magazines or use other magazines for training with full metal jacket rounds, which are much more cheap and common and less expensive to buy and train with constantly. But for my carry ammo, I will reduce how many times I'm chambering and rechambering the same rounds and carrying that ammunition. As kind of a side note, I store all ammunition, whether it's target, defensive, hunting, range stuff, whatever. It's all stored in ammo cans that have a seal, that are sealed from the environment. It's sealed from the air and the moisture. But my carry ammo is the only ammunition I have that's always out in the open. It's always out there, exposed to the air, exposed to the moisture. If you're concealed carrying a gun and there's a little bit of sweat or perspiration and the gun is a little bit sweaty, whatever, and some of that moisture gets around the ammunition, these are things that we don't like, but there's kind of no way to avoid it. And that's why cycling your carry ammunition throughout the months is generally going to be a good idea. Again, we're trying to hedge. We're trying to hedge our bets and put as many advantages in our corner as possible. And one of the things we can do is to help increase the chances of reliability, to make sure the ammunition we have chosen and are carrying is still going to go bang every time. So let's see, moving on from that, trying to stay on target. I've already talked about the cleaning and maintenance side of the house. There are some guns that are known for being able to shoot a lot of rounds without maintenance or cleaning, and they can still function. I would still urge for people to clean your guns every time you shoot. That is your opportunity to clean out the carbon, the copper, the fouling, to also inspect and look at the gun to see if there's any unusual signs of wear, or if you're seeing maybe something, a crack or something is broken, something shows up that you didn't previously see. You can at least tackle that problem now as opposed to waiting till something gets worse. And it also provides more familiarity with the gun. If it's a concealed carry gun, you're going to know how to field strip it. You're going to know how to clean it. You're going to know how to maintain it. You're going to know how to shoot it. You're going to look at the different research and numbers and data and things that are out there. And you're going to be able to choose quality defensive ammunition for actual carry. And it's not a simple matter of buying a box, loading up your carry mags, and just kind of that's what we do. I typically buy 2 or 3 boxes for one pistol, and I'll shoot at least an entire box of it through the gun, and I'm checking to make sure the gun likes it, the gun is cycling it, there's no issues there. But I'm also checking it to see recoil impulse. Is this a little bit more, or is it about the same as the target practice stuff? And then thirdly, I'm checking for point of impact. Sometimes the point of impact is going to be a little bit different on your defensive stuff, depending on what grain load you choose, as opposed to where it's going to be impacting with your standard target ammunition. And again, over the years, I've kind of noticed that autoloaders or semi-auto pistols tend to have a lesser impact shift, and it's generally more a matter of a tighter or bigger group, but it's hitting in the same location, as opposed to wheel guns and revolvers. And I don't know why that is. I can't tell you from a scientific perspective. It's just something I've noticed over the years. Revolvers tend to have a little bit more of a point of impact shift or difference as you change to different boxes of target and range ammo. So that just kind of throwing that out there. Now, in terms of training and in terms of shooting all the time. We're not all made of money. We're not all millionaires. We don't have a bunch of money to be out there at the range training all the time. How can we help get the reps in and still maintain some level of concurrent training and familiarity with our carry or defensive guns, but we're not spending $1 million having to buy all this ammo and shooting thousands of rounds a month? How do we do this? There's one huge thing that helps out a lot, and I actually shoot more 22s than I shoot anything else, and that is to get yourself either a quality 22 conversion kit, whether it's a matter of changing out the slide and barrel and everything from the 9mm or whatever slide and barrel you have, and then changing out the upper half of the pistol, and now you have a quality, competent, functional 22 conversion slide. Or in the case of me, I carry a Glock 19X every day, and as a training pistol, I've recently picked up several weeks ago a Glock 44, a Glock Model 44, a 22 trainer gun, their first 22. And I'm going to be doing a quick look and then a review on that gun, but all I got to say is I absolutely love this gun. The Glock 44, outstanding trainer gun. But sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, trigger squeeze, breathing, everything, all the fundamentals of marksmanship are the same. And I love it too because the holsters, moving over the weapon light, the mag carriers, everything still works. And it's a simple matter of changing out the 19X on the range to the Glock 44 and then continuing training, jumping back to the 9mm version, the 19X, the actual one I carry, jumping back to the Glock 44. So there's a lot of great training that you can do, some low cost, good, effective training that you can accomplish with 22 conversion kits or dedicated 22 pistols that are much like or built to be the same as your carry gun. There's a lot of good stuff that you can do with 22s, and there's even better stuff too that you can also do at home, provided the gun's unloaded and everything. There's all kinds of stuff these days with inserting a round that emits a laser, so when you dry fire with it and you're aiming at the special target, it shows you your shot group, so you can practice trigger presses. So you don't simply just have to dry fire at home, again, ensuring and double checking it's unloaded before you commence training. And I personally separate all ammo, just not even in my workspace or area at all if I'm doing dry fire training. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things we can do to help enhance or continue training, even if we don't have the time or the money to go out to the range and expend the actual centerfire ammunition that we're going to be using in the defensive gun. So now the next thing we can talk about is carrying spare ammunition. And some people are of the mindset, well, most concealed carry individual self-defense scenarios by the numbers, it's a very short range encounter and it's several shots at most, and generally that's the end of the scenario. And you would not be wrong if we're looking by the numbers and by the data. But at the same time, when you're facing some kind of individual self-defense, like a legitimate lawful self-defense circumstance or scenario, where it's one aggressor or one attacker and it's a legitimate use of a firearm for lawful self-defense, that would be true. But the challenge becomes if we are looking at circumstances of multiple attackers, or we're looking at a circumstance, especially a public attack or an active shooting or something like that, we are now dealing with something that is going to be inherently different. And it may be a circumstance that's going to require more than 1 to 2 shots. If that's going to be the kind of environment that fell into our lap despite our best efforts, and we don't want to be in this situation, but this is my life now and I have to fight, and I've got the attitude that this is what I'm doing. A little J-frame 5-shot 38 snub-nose revolver may not necessarily be the thing that you're going to want to show up to when you have 1 or 2 or multiple attackers with semi-automatic rifles or some kind of craziness going on. There's 2 points to kind of discuss on that. One is I generally always carry spare ammunition. I'll have a 19-round magazine in my Glock 19X, and then I'll have a spare 19-round magazine on the belt line. I also utilize my vehicle, and I think that's something that's not maybe talked about enough, but I do have a full CLS bag, a squad kit of tourniquets, emergency bandages, wound packing gauze, chest seals, things that maybe the situation has already been resolved for the moment. Maybe the attack is done, it's over, but now we are dealing with a circumstance where there are casualties everywhere. It is a mass casualty kind of event. So the purpose now is, okay, the fighting is done, or at least we're pretty sure it's over, or at least we have verified, okay, there's nothing crazy going on now. Now it's a matter of what is the best help that I can do. Again, being more of an asset to public safety and helping others as opposed to being more of a hazard. And maybe your time and place or your function or purpose in that kind of scenario is maybe you never even met the attacker, never saw, never had to do any exchanging fire or anything. Maybe the gun never even had to come out of the holster, but you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, and now there's a bunch of casualties laying everywhere, and there's not enough, or maybe medical personnel are not on the scene yet. Maybe there's not enough, and this is a matter of personal, ethical, and also legal choice. But maybe your function and task and purpose is there's no longer a need for gunplay, and now it's more a matter of, okay, there are people who need help, and there are no medical personnel or EMTs or paramedics. There's no one here yet, and I'm here so I can do the best good that I can, which not just training with the firearms and seeking firearms instruction and training and competitions, but I also tack on the idea that, you know what, it's not a bad idea to go to, some kind of stop the bleeding workshop or some kind of medical or combat casualty care or traumatic care. These are skills that are valuable no matter what, that you're driving on the side of the road and you're just driving and you see a horrible car accident. It looks like it just happened. There's no authorities there. There's no one there. There are people who are hurt, and you didn't ask for this, but you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, or in this case, the right place at the right time. You do have actual training. You do have actual equipment. And maybe you can affect some kind of positive change or do something good and actually start helping people. And that might just save someone's life. If you do backcountry skiing, you do mountaineering, you do canyoneering, you do rappelling, you have outdoor sports, or you're doing stuff like that, not a bad idea to have a medical kit and know how to use it. And I'm not just talking Band-Aids for little boo-boos and stuff. I'm talking tourniquets, emergency bandages, things that you would actually need to deal with compound fractures or to deal with severe kind of injuries that might happen. And typically, what are we doing if we're out in Zion or Arches or Moab? What are we doing if we're out in the remote wilderness backpacking or hiking or camping, or we're doing this awesome fishing trip? We're probably in a place where there's either no cell reception, there's no other people to help, or maybe both. And in that kind of circumstance, probably would not be a bad idea to go do some kind of medical training workshop, to have the equipment, the proper quality medical stuff on hand, and to actually know how to use it. So that's just kind of food for thought. That's something I do, but on top of the medical supplies in the vehicle, I also have extra ammunition. I will always have an AR-15 in the truck. That's always going to happen, and I always take it with me out of the house, put it in the truck, take it to work, take it back in the house at the end of the day. I don't leave guns in a vehicle overnight. That's just not what I do. But wherever I am in public, whether I'm just going out in public, whether I'm at work, wherever I am, whether it's home, it's work, it's traveling, it's whatever, you can guarantee there's at least going to be a long gun in my vehicle with a grip of magazines for it, and it's probably going to be an AR-15 just about 95% of the time. There's going to be spare pistol ammunition there as well, and these are just things to think about. I'm not trying to do some kind of Alamo last stand. I'm not trying to turn my vehicle into some kind of static defensive position or, ammo resupply point or something crazy like that. I just like to have options. And it kind of goes with that old adage of I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And that's just how I live my life. These are just ideas, throwing things out there so you can kind of see how I'm approaching this kind of circumstance. But I think this moves down to a deeper discussion and going away from the mechanics and the logistics of stuff and moving more back into a conceptual idea, which is very important here, is I think it is important to identify the mission in terms of why do we conceal carry and what am I doing out here in public and what is the mission. And if you're a single person, no spouse, no kids, nothing, it's just you and you're out in public and lawfully concealed carrying, and there is some kind of wrong place, wrong time, active shooter kind of crazy situation going on, I think there's this kind of goes twofold. One is, what does your ethical moral compass dictate that you do in that kind of horrible situation? And two is, we do have to at least be cognizant of the law. Is there, in our state or local jurisdiction, is there a law that we must escape, we must retreat, we must not insert ourselves or stick around or be part of the problem or take action and do things when we could have left? Or do we have some kind of stand your ground statute or some kind of something in place that allows for someone to intervene if there is a critical attack or need of public emergency that you were able to be part of that? I'm not going to sit here and tell people to run towards the gunfire. And I'm not going to sit here and tell people to escape and flee and just worry about yourself. All that I'm saying is, yes, there's the law, and we're law-abiding citizens. We know the law, we observe the law, we study the law, we stay within the confines of it because we fall under the purview of the law. But something else to consider is, you must wake up and be happy with yourself every day. You must live with yourself every day, and only you can truly be happy with or judge yourself truly, internally. I'm talking intrinsically looking at yourself. And the choices that we make in daily life, whether it's our dealings with our coworkers, it's our dealings with our friends and family, it's how we conduct ourselves to the people we know and to random strangers, and whatever decisions we're making in life, at the end of the day, you have to go home and maybe bring out the adult beverage and chill on the couch, maybe put on the TV or read a book or whatever your, chill down process is. But at the end of the day, you got to go home and face yourself and be happy with yourself and be content or happy with the choices that you are making or have made in life or that day. And then you got to wake up and you got to do it again, because you wake up as yourself. You have to be happy with yourself and the choices you are making and have made. And at the end of the day, if you are the kind of person that you know that you morally, ethically cannot, it is not within your moral compass to be okay with just leaving and running and worrying about yourself while other people are dying, and every second you're running away and just doing you and just getting out of there and, oh, I'm so glad I'm fine and everybody else can die, like whatever, I'm not part of it anymore, and you're okay with that, it is not my I'm not going to sit here and judge you. Be like, hey, you have identified that that is what is acceptable and that is okay. It is not a matter of judgment. It's not a matter of me trying to talk down on anyone who has made that identification. That requires being very honest and upfront with yourself, very confident in your own moral compass and your own choices. And that's not my place. I'm not here to talk down on anybody that in the face of a horrible, crazy, chaotic event, even if you could do something and you decide, you know what, I'm just going to get out of here and good luck, everybody. I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to be part of this. And I know I have a gun or I have training or I have whatever, but you know what? I'm not going to be part of this. This is not what I'm doing. I'm leaving is what I'm doing. And that's my mission, is to get myself out of here and preserve myself. And it's tragic what might happen to other people. And maybe I could have changed something or helped. But you know what? That sucks and it's not me and I don't care, because I care about me and that's what it is. If that's the kind of decision and that's the SOP or how you want to run things and the choices you want to make and you are happy with that, then you know what? It's not my place to judge or quite frankly talk shit or whatever. There is an alternative strategy, depending on moral compass or preconceived or predetermined, rationally discussed and thought over, and then predetermined decisions that have been made, where other people might be, you know what, I have a gun, I have the training, I put in the reps, I put in the time, I can facilitate a positive outcome and help preserve life. And I know that I am going to be taking on personal, physical, and legal potential risk. But you know what is not acceptable in my outlook and with my life and myself is for me to just do me and get myself out of there and then go home and see on the news that 20-something people died at the place I was just at. And I could have maybe done something, and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life wondering, oh, why did you just run when you could have done something to help save lives? And if that is your moral compass, that, you know what, I know I'm going to be taking on personal risk, both physically, playing, gambling with my life, and also, legally, civilly speaking, there might be challenges afterwards, but you know what? I know myself, and I know my personal moral compass. I know my ethics. I know my morals, and I know that I am not going to be okay with myself for the rest of my life if I could have helped save lives, and I chose to run. So again, this is not me telling people, oh, you should run towards the gunfire and help out. This is not me saying, oh, you should run away and get out of there. This is me saying that we need to think over, discuss, and do some soul searching or whatever you need to do and identify the mission. What is the mission? And especially this becomes even more important when we're talking about, let's say you're married and let's say you have kids and you guys are at the mall going out there shopping, or you're having dinner somewhere, whatever, and you are with your family. And God forbid some horrible, crazy, chaotic shit is going down. Wrong place, wrong time. Again, what is the mission? The mission is to get your wife and kids and family and your people out of there and back home safely. And whatever that mission is, some guys might be like, oh, I'll just tell, the wife or whatever to take the kids and go, and hopefully I'll see you on the other side or something crazy like that. Okay. That's a personal choice. But if I am in public with family or friends or people that I feel that responsibility for, that I am the guy who is quietly just doing my thing and just paying attention to what's going on around me, and I am the one who is at least in my own mind, I am responsible for their safety, and I'm responsible for driving safe and paying attention to what's happening, and some craziness is happening. The mission at that point, at least for me, is to get my people out of there, to get my friends, my family, get my people the hell out of there. And I am not going to be the guy that's going to be like, second party or the most responsible person here, take the other people and go, and I'm going to go try to do cool guy stuff. My mission is to get my people the hell out. Because when the shooting starts and people start dying, that is fucking awful. And I'm sorry for the language in this podcast. There's no way to sugarcoat this. It is fucking awful. And if I'm especially in public and I have wife and kids and people are with me, or I have attachments in public, the mission is to get my people out of there and make sure that they make it home safe. That's the mission. Now, maybe you have family, wife, kids, you have people that are relying on you. Maybe you're the major breadwinner for the household. Maybe, whatever the case may be, that maybe they're not physically with you, but you do have attachments. You do have people who love you, who care about you, who rely upon you, who need you. And some craziness is going on. What is the mission? And that's not something some dude on the internet in a podcast can tell you. That comes with a lot of soul searching. It comes with really examining your moral compass, your ethos and ethics, and also knowing at least the statute with regards to the law of where you are and how is this going down. And every situation is going to be completely different. We could what if this for days. I'm just saying that whatever the mission is, first of all, through a lot of intelligent and emotional and intellectual thought and soul searching, you need to come up with what is the mission. And when you identify that, you stick to it. When the chips are down, you stick to it. Always stick to your mission. What is the identified, predetermined mission in this shit show? If this were to happen, what is the mission? And whatever that mission is, that you come to terms with it, you're like, you know what? This is the mission. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. This is what's going on. You stick to the mission and do not deviate. Stick to the mission. And it may not be the cool guy, heroic John Wick thing. You may not, whatever the case may be, but you are sticking to your mission and you are making that happen. That is at least in my opinion, what I think is paramount and something I think we should all do. And to really have a serious, thought exchange or conversation with your loved ones or some self-reflection, whatever you need to do. But establish what is the mission. And when you have that established, I would suggest, stick to the mission. Now, going back to the law, because a lot of that was emotional, moral, ethical, moral compass kind of stuff. Going back to the law, depending on what states or localities, again, it's all just dependent on your local area. But going back to the law, there are going to be certain consequences for potentially injecting yourself in a situation where you might be driving by and you see something happen. And actually, as a recent example, somewhere nearby, the next town over, that happened relatively recently within the past year, there was a boyfriend-girlfriend outside their house. They were in an argument, and the boyfriend apparently was getting a little physical, and just a random concealed carry dude was driving by and noticed that he was in fear for this woman's life, that, oh, wow, this guy might actually put the hurt on her and something really bad could happen here. So he pulls over and decides to inject himself into this circumstance. And no matter what happened, the physical, verbal altercation stuff was going on. The end result was the good Samaritan guy driving by with a concealed carry and a gun, sees what's going on, pulls over. In the end, by the time the smoke clears, the concealed carry guy shoots the argumentative, apparently violent boyfriend, and that guy dies. And now it becomes a question of, legally speaking, within the statute of this state and how things run here, is that legally something within the confines of the law? That it could be argued he was being a good Samaritan and trying to protect her. The other way could be, he had no business inserting himself in the circumstance and somebody died, like maybe he wasn't doing the right thing, or he was kind of being a dick at the moment, or whatever was going on, but he didn't need to die. And if you survive the legal challenge, then you might have the civil, and oftentimes you will have the civil challenge of the family might come after you. Well, they didn't take you down for manslaughter or murder, and legally you're fine, but we're going to sue you because our son or whoever didn't need to die, and you're the one who did it. So, and in the civil case, you need at least 51%, at least half of the jury to make that determination, as opposed to a criminal case where you need a unanimous jury. And that's going to be different than the civil case. These are all things we have to weigh. Now, being objective, if you're the guy driving by that kind of circumstance, is it within your moral compass to see someone in obvious or potential imminent lethal danger and just say, you know what, not my problem. I'm just going to keep driving. I didn't see that. Whatever. Are you the kind of person that, you know what, I'm going to get myself out of here because this is crazy and I don't want to be part of this, but I am going to call 911 and I'm just going to let the authorities know, like, hey, this is going down and I'm going to get myself out of here, but like, I just need to let you know something is happening? Are you the kind of person that would actually stop, get out, make verbal contact, and then everything rolls downhill from there, and however that's going to happen, and you may end up killing someone, even though that was not at all your intentions and it's not how you wanted things to go? There's a lot of moving pieces here. And again, it's a matter of self-reflection. It's a matter of soul-searching and coming up with whatever your mission is, but also what are you comfortable living with, of action or inaction. And it's also a matter of knowing and understanding the laws for your state and locality, and how is that judicially going to be looked at of what you did. Is it in line with the standards and training that you got for the permit? Is it in line with your moral compass? Is it in line with the law? Or what is the deal? And these are all things, again, we can come up with what if scenarios all day. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the decision-making process when the chips are down and horrible shit is happening, I think a lot of the decisions that are being made are things that were already decided on months, years, decades before that individual thing actually happened. A lot of it comes down to our personal character and makeup, our ethical, moral compass within the confines of the law. There's a lot that goes into it, but I believe that if you identify these things before the chips are down, or before you find yourself having to make this up on the fly and kind of make decisions as you go, if you know yourself and you know the decisions you are comfortable making and not comfortable making, and you've decided, you know what, I have identified this is my mission and I'm going to stick to the mission, I think that is probably going to be the best way to set yourself up for success. So you don't find yourself just obliviously going out there and suddenly there's a circumstance, you didn't put any thought into it, and now we're making decisions on the fly, which is almost always a horrible idea. Says me, just one guy's opinion. All right, so now I'm going to try to wrap things up and try to cover the last bases here that I have not yet covered, so we can get this thing done. And if you're still hanging around and listening, I thank you for being here. And of course, this is a pretty heavy topic, and there's definitely some ideas and thoughts I have that I just wanted to put out as part of this updated video. So let's get to the final things here so we can wrap it up. Going back to the logistics or mechanics of how we are concealed carrying. In terms of gun selection, we talked about the different things that we were looking for: reliability, durability, and simplicity if we can get it. We talked about ammo selection, of range and practice stuff, versus testing out and selecting defensive ammo. And I actually think one of the more useful sources of data that you can tap into, besides watching some dudes on YouTube shooting ballistic gelatin or making up their own barrier penetration, whatever they're doing. And I'm not associated with them, but luckygunner.com. Now, their thing is they sell ammo. So they have a whole set of ballistic testing that they have done. It's actually quite an impressive amount of data and standardized testing to the FBI protocols that they have done between 38 and 357 and 9, 40, 45, all of your common defensive carry calibers. And they show what that looks like in the terminal ballistics gel. They did multiple shots on fresh pieces of ballistic gel that were properly calibrated to the FBI standard. And you can click on the caliber that you're carrying or looking at carrying and look at the different defensive loads, and they shot them out of different barrel lengths, and you can see the high-speed footage, you can see the data, you can see everything they collected, shooting them out of these guns, real guns, not just like test barrels or whatever the manufacturer says, but they were looking at velocities, they were looking at expansion, permanent and temporary wound cavities, they were looking at performance. Everything that matters from a terminal ballistic side of the house. Lucky Gunner Labs, if you type that in, you check them out. Again, I'm not associated with them, and kind of their angle is, they sell ammunition and things like that. So I think the idea is that you would look at the results, see what you like, and then order whatever ammunition that you end up choosing. But just from a kind of an objective standpoint of trying to do some research and see the different types of defensive ammunition out there, I think that's an incredible resource. Like I said, I'm not associated with them, but I do find that bank of information to be very worthwhile, at least just from a research and kind of seeking out data kind of perspective. I think they did a pretty good job testing the various common defensive loads with different barrel lengths and the common calibers, and providing all that data and research and their findings. So that might be something to check out if you're interested in looking at, what would be the difference between standard range full metal jacket practice ammunition as opposed to actual jacketed hollow point or bonded core or ballistic tip defensive rounds. So moving on, more mechanics, logistics. We're talking about holsters real quick. There are a million guns and a million types of holsters, and there's a million ways to carry, whether it's on the hip, it's inside the waistband, it's outside the waistband, it's an ankle holster, it's a pocket carry gun, it's maybe it's a briefcase or purse gun. So that's what we'll call off-body carry, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like the idea of being separated from my concealed carry defensive instrument, but also a loaded firearm. If I misplace my briefcase or the purse goes missing or stolen, I'm more a fan of on-body carry because it's readily available and you control what is happening to it. At the end of the day, we are looking for holsters that have proper trigger coverage. And that becomes especially important when we're talking about safe action guns, something like a Glock 19, something where there is no manual safety, there's no exposed hammer, there's no double single action. It is a safe action gun. And I do have a video if you haven't seen it and you're interested. It's called Condition of Carry. I'll put it in the description, where I have everything from a double action revolver, a 1911, so that's a single action only exposed hammer manual safety gun. I've got a Glock on there, and I've got the double single action design. So I've got the four main types of guns and how we would carry those guns in the holster. And I also show examples of good and bad holsters in that video. So if you're looking on some more follow-on information, I'm not going to waste airtime on it here because I've already covered it there. Condition of carry. And that leads real quick, touching on the last final point about holsters. We're looking for good, proper trigger coverage. We're looking for a good, proper fit to the gun, where the barrel is perfectly covered so we don't have barrel sticking out the bottom. We don't have weird stuff going on. And we do want some level of retention. And moving on that, when I'm at work in the gun shop and at the gun range, that is the only place on planet Earth that you will ever find me open carrying. And when I do that, I have a holster that has thumb drive retention, so somebody just couldn't come up behind me while I'm working on fixing a target or sweeping brass, or my attention is elsewhere, that someone just can't come up behind me or on the side, just grab the frame or the handle of the gun, try to pull it out of my holster. I do believe in some kind of retention, and at least at a very bare minimum, let's say it's an inside the waistband Kydex holster, so it's custom fit to your gun, at least some kind of snap fit, retention fit. And a lot of those holsters actually have some form of tension or adjustability, but at the end of the day, some kind of actual thumb drive retention or some kind of mechanism that is durable, quality, reliable, that you can count on, that you need to activate something to unlock and unholster the gun, I think is preferable if and when you can get that. And there's a million holster options, whether it's on the waist, whether it's cross draw, shoulder rig, whatever it is. And even if it's a pocket gun, even if it's a J-frame 38 stub nose revolver, I would still insist that it goes in a pocket holster, or maybe it's a Glock 43, or it's a small, maybe a SIG P365, or a Springfield Hellcat, whatever it is, a little pocket gun. I still insist on a pocket holster that has good trigger coverage, and it has the grippy outside texture so it stays in the pocket, so when you pull it out, you just get the gun. I'm not a fan of, loading 5 out of 5 rounds in a J-frame revolver, or chambering a round in a pocket pistol and just throwing it in the pocket and calling it good. If there's spare change, keys, pen, or you randomly have to put something in your pocket, but there's a gun that's not in a pocket holster and there's stuff floating around your pocket, not a big fan of that. I'm always going to advocate for a proper, competent holster that has at least trigger coverage, some kind of retention, and some kind of way of ensuring nothing is going to get in that trigger guard. And that especially goes for safe action guns, striker fire guns that have no manual safety. Now, I have no problems with that. And going back to that condition of carry video, if you haven't seen it, the spoiler alert is I do believe absolutely in carrying with a round in the chamber. Concealed carry is a journey, and oftentimes when people start concealed carrying, they just get their permit, they just got a good concealed carry gun, it checks all those great boxes of being reliable, it's durable, it's simple, whatever it is, and there are people who will hesitate to carry with a round in the chamber. And that is often a sign of someone who is either brand new or in conjunction with that or separately to that or, kind of causation to that. They have a lack of training or they don't trust the gun that they're carrying to have a round in the chamber all day and carry it just like that. And these are all not good things. Again, I've already harped on training. I think you need to go out there, get that training. If it's a gun that you don't trust, you probably don't want to be carrying that gun to defend your life or have it as a home defense gun or something that you would put your life to. If it's a brand new Gen 5 Glock 19 and it's a gun that is totally trustworthy and good to go, but you personally don't trust it because you don't know how it works internally, you don't know how the safe action striker fire system works, so you're hesitant to put a round in the chamber. Again, this is generally stuff I see when it comes to lack of training or being brand new to the concealed carry world or not. Maybe the gun itself is trustworthy, but they don't trust the gun enough yet. And my answer to solve all of this is honestly get training, get trained. And if it takes you having to take even an armorer's course, and now you are a certified Glock armorer and you did it on a weekend just to do it, whatever, and you now fully understand how this gun works, and now you mentally know and can see in your mind how these parts interface and what is preventing that gun from ever going off unless you're pulling the trigger. If that's what it takes, do what you got to do. But for me, the concept of carrying an unloaded gun, to me is quite frankly just worthless. I don't, if you have training and you have time and you're not unfamiliar with guns and you still insist on carrying without a round in the chamber, I'm a little bit baffled. I don't know how to I don't understand that. I'm just going to say that. Because for me, it's like, I'm going to drive in my car and I'm not going to wear my seatbelt. But then right before I get in an accident, I'm going to put on my seatbelt real quick and that'll save me. You probably won't have the time. And when it comes to going back to the guns, in a lawful self-defense encounter, again, going back to the data, we're talking about very close up front and personal. It's probably already happened in terms of the gunfight started as a fist fight or a knife fight with edged weapons. The attacker's on top of you. It's really up close and personal. Things are already horrible. And if we have a gun that has no round in the chamber, that is going to require us to put a round in the chamber. That's going to require two functional, useful arms and hands, or that's going to require hoping that you can grab, your rear sight on the edge of your belt or the edge of a desk or something that may be nearby to kind of rack it with one hand or something. And my question is why? Much like the seatbelt and driving down the road situation, if I'm going down the highway, I don't know if I'm about to blow a tire and flip over. I don't know if someone's going to come out of nowhere and there's going to be a car accident. I just prefer to have the seatbelt on, and then if I get in a car accident, it's going to be instantaneous and fractions of a second. And I would rather just have it on because if I need it, it's ready to go. And the same concept in my mind applies to carrying a firearm concealed for self-defense. Get trained is what I would say. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I'm just more confused. For the newer shooters, the people without training, or maybe it's a good gun and they don't understand how it works. They don't trust it yet. They don't know. I can understand that, but guys, I've seen guys doing this a long time and they will always carry without a round in the chamber, and it just defies, I do not understand that. So if you are kind of new in your concealed carry journey, you're still getting the training, you're still working through some stuff, learning more every day, and you have not gotten to that comfort zone yet, that's something I can understand. It's a journey. It takes time, but I would just, my solution for this is get trained. Please, like, get training. And if it's a gun that we can't trust because we have reliability or durability problems and we are worried about an AD, an accidental discharge, where the gun is mechanically at fault, we did not want the gun to go off and it did anyway, we should not be carrying that gun. We need a reliable, durable, trustworthy, simple gun. So that's just how I'm going to leave it. If you want to see the various different common types of pistols and how we would carry them in examples of good and bad holsters, I would definitely recommend the condition of carry video that I put out months ago. But moving forward, the last thing I'll say about holsters is if you have a safe action gun where it comes out of the holster, and let's say in a training environment, it comes out of the holster, we're going to pop a couple shots, whatever the drill requires, and then it gets reholstered. And of course, it's getting reholstered with a round in the chamber, with more ammo still in the mag, everything's good. And we're doing that with a Glock or an M&P or a 320 or some kind of safe action defensive gun that has no manual safety, and the only external safety, at least that you get to see, is that trigger, either a hinge trigger or the trigger blade or whatever it is. Definitely we need to pay attention to what is happening with our attire. And if you have one of those cool guy like fleece jackets that has like the bungees with like the tension straps on the left and right sides of your fleece jacket or whatever, we don't want to be in the business of wearing clothes that have dangling straps or bungees or things that could possibly, in the act of reholstering, find their way into the trigger guard, and then the gun is not holstering, and in the flash of a moment, we're just shoving the gun, trying to put the gun back in the holster, and then we fire the gun. That would be a negligent discharge. That was something you did, and you didn't want the gun to go off, but out of a fault of your own or things that you were doing, you caused it to go off without you wanting it to. And at the end of the day, if we're dealing with especially a safe action gun or something of that nature, or really any gun, but especially safe action guns, which I carry, totally trustworthy, great, good to go with training, we're definitely going to make sure our attire is going to be appropriate for that. And we're not going to have this huge jacket with all these danglies and things coming off of it. We're going to pay attention to that. And speaking on attire, as a side note, attire will dictate the holster options and how you're going to carry the gun. And if it's winter time, we're generally going to have thicker jackets, concealment options open up, versus probably the worst or hardest situation would be hanging out on the boardwalk at the beach, and we're wearing board shorts and flip-flops. And that's another thing, is more of as a personal preference, but you will never see me in public with sandals. It's just not going to, you could put that on the list of things that's not going to happen. I want footwear that I can run to or from something with. I want footwear that I can actually run with. And that's a lesson I actually learned my second day in Afghanistan when the C-130 went down, and all I had running out of the shower was my retarded flip-flops, trying to run to get my stuff on to go to the trucks and go. And I learned a valuable lesson that night of, at least overseas setting, I always took running shoes with me to the shower or anywhere I was going. So even if I'm wearing shower shoes in the shower, I have running shoes I can throw on and go. In civilian life, I carry these lessons where I want footwear that's not going to slip and fall off my feet. If I need to run to something or run away from something, I want to be able to move. And the only thing I need to worry about is my own cardio and physical abilities, as opposed to my footwear flying off my feet. So that's kind of a side note. I just wanted to throw that your way while I was at it. Okay, moving on. Some guys have asked about open carry. What are your thoughts on open carry? And like I previously said, the only place on planet Earth you will ever discover me open carrying is in a gun shop where we all carry guns. and we're sitting on machine guns, we're sitting on suppressors, we're sitting on a bunch of guns, we have a bunch of cash. And at the end of the day, I'm not trying to play around with someone crazy enough or dedicated enough to attempt to rob or strong point a gun shop. So that is the only place on planet Earth you will ever find me open carrying. Yes, I'm in an environment or a workplace or a profession where that is what we do, and I'm just going to have it pre-staged. In terms of open carrying as a regular dude in public, my answer is no. Now, I don't want to get this twisted. I still firmly believe in the right for everyone to open carry, and I never want that to go away. And you will see it. The exception I'll make is, like, for example, the rally that recently was held in Virginia, in Richmond, where that was kind of, hey, we're all going to open carry. We're going to show how many gun owners are out here, and this is what we're about. It's going to be a peaceful day of protest. We're going to use Martin Luther King Day, typically lobby day, and this is what we're going to do. That would be an exception. But beyond something very unique or special like that, or where I am at my given place of work, you will never see me open carry. And the reason for that is because I think there is value in just going about my business. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm not looking for physical or verbal altercation. I'm not looking for drama. I'm not looking for attention. I'm not looking for problems. And if I open carry in public, you might get a perception value that may not be as pleasant. Something that concerns me, or something I don't want to create, is I don't want somebody to call 911 and then the cops come over, and it's not even just about inconveniencing my time. It's about the fact that they have real stuff to do. They have actual calls they have to go to. They have real people who need real help, and they have crimes being committed or something is in progress, and they have actual work to do. And they're going to talk to me and probably look at my ID and who are you, and, make sure my background is clean. I don't have any warrants or whatever. And it's going to be really weird, and it's going to be a pain in everyone's life. And then we're going to go about our business. And at the end of the day, I don't want to tie up law enforcement for them doing their job. I don't want my day inconvenienced. And I think there is tactical value in just out of sight, out of mind, lawfully just doing your own thing, minding your own business. You're not trying to shine attention on you. You're not trying to cause a scene. You're not trying to freak people out. And again, I don't want to get it twisted. I firmly believe in open carry. I don't think it should ever go away. It should always be legal. That's within our rights. It just, as a personal choice, I find extreme value in keeping it concealed and out of sight and out of mind, and not making a fuss and not having a problem. And from the tactical advantage side of the house, I find advantage in the fact that if I'm in a convenience store, for example, and I'm open carrying, and everyone can see I have it, and there's a criminal or someone who is intent on robbing that convenience store, there's two challenges right now. One is, if he sees me inside and he can see that I'm just a dude and I have a gun, well, maybe he'll conceal his gun. And now he knows exactly who he needs to kill first, and now he can plus up his firepower, take that in the dump bag, and now he's got money and an extra gun, and that's cool. That's good for him. Challenge number two is, he may not see me open carrying. I think there's this perception, if I'm open carrying, then you would have to be crazy to want to rob whatever store or place I'm at, because you can see I'm carrying. Maybe not. You might be behind the aisle doing your own thing, open carrying, and some dude comes in there to rob the place, and he did not see you with that. And he turns around the corner, everyone's putting their hands up, and he sees that you have a gun on you. Everything just changed, because again, this is not part of the plan. And now you having a gun and now being identified as an immediate threat to that person, of them interrupting their plans or potentially getting in the way of their plans of robbing the place or whatever it is they're going to do, they might just decide, you know what, I'm going to take this guy out, and maybe he's going to shoot, maybe he's going to run, maybe whatever. This is just, I'm looking at the down select of options and consequences that could follow here. And we could again play what if all day, but none of these options look all that pleasant. And, I think there is advantage and just out of sight, out of mind, minding my own business, not looking for attention, not looking for a fight, not looking for problems. I'm just doing my thing, and let's all be peaceful and respectful to each other, and let's have a great, safe day. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to cause commotion or potentially set myself up for a situation that I do not want to be part of. So that's all that I have to say when it comes to open carry. And again, I don't want to see it go away. It's legally our rights, and that's how I view it. And there are, between work or some kind of pro-Second Amendment freedom rally or whatever, outside of those circumstances, you will never see me open carrying. That's just a personal choice. So just kind of wrapping this up, I wanted to revisit my ideas on concealed carry, and I wanted to kind of revamp my original video from almost 7 years ago. And I think there's a lot of that that's still valid, but at the same time, there's certain things that I've observed or been part of or had some differences of opinion or changes, or certain things maybe I didn't mention the first time that I wanted to make sure I mentioned this time. And again, like I said, I am just a dude on the internet voicing my own opinion, which I admit is not sound, competent legal advice. So when it comes to the legalities of stuff, again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop, I'm not a defense attorney, I'm not a judge, I'm not a prosecutor. I am a dude on the internet. And none of this is competent legal advice. These are just personal opinions and theories and ideas. And this is just kind of where I'm at in terms of Concealed Carry Doctrine in 2020 and kind of how things are going. And if you guys have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear it from you guys. Got different approaches, different ideas, or maybe I failed to cover a certain base or a certain topic and you want to know an idea from that. You know, I'd love to hear from you guys, and I do appreciate you guys for being here, and I do appreciate you guys for listening and sticking it out. I know this kind of ended up being above feature length. Now, in terms of administrative notes, we have some good news, at least some, I don't want to say bad or somewhat good news, but it's kind of a mixed bag. Definitely big news in Virginia due to the rally, which did help. Again, that was the day we became one. We did the right answer, peaceful, lawful protest showing, hey, these are the gun owners, we vote, and this is what we want and don't want. The assault weapons bill, the biggest one that was the most draconian, that was going to make everyone that had AR-15s and the like basically felons and or misdemeanor charges could follow overnight. That got defeated, at least for now. That's the caveat, for now. This is not to say that maybe next year on the legislative docket that you might see this bill come back from the dead, or maybe revised or changed a little bit to make it more, air quotes, acceptable, that maybe it'll pass the smell test next time. Maybe they can slip it in. From what I understand, there's some other minor ones that did pass, but the big one that we did not want to pass in Virginia, that one failed. So that's kind of administrative note that we need to always be vigilant of what is going on. And it's not just our state. If it's happening to our Second Amendment brothers and sisters in another state, we need to care and we need to unify and we need to come together just like we did in the Richmond rally. And like I said, that was the absolute right answer. That's how we should do things. And I'm still very proud of everyone who could take time off work or travel or be part of that, and how everyone conducted themselves. That was exactly the right answer of how we should have done it. And you can see the proof is in the pudding. We got at least mostly favorable results, but that does not mean it's not going to come back later. So always need to be paying attention to what's going on. The next administrative note is I have started work on the Black Bass Musket project. And giving you just a little bottom line up front, what is it? It is the idea that I believe things like the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, our Constitution, these things, individual liberties, our Bill of Rights, these things, even though the time and the technology and the times have changed, these things were written to be and meant to be, and in fact are eternal. These conceptual ideas of which our country was founded on are eternal. So even though the technology and the guns Everything else has changed over time. The conceptual ideas behind the Second Amendment and the First Amendment and the rest of them, they're all the same. They're timeless. So in trying to pursue a project in line with my beliefs in terms of that, I want to make a modern version of the Brown Bess musket. And for those who don't know, the Brown Bess musket was the most prolific musket used by the Continental Army, and certainly private citizens had their own fowling pieces and Kentucky and Pennsylvania long rifles or whatever they could acquire, whether it was British Enfields or whatever it was. But the Brown Bess musket, and even to this day, for the EIB and the CIB, the Expert Infantry Badge, Combat Infantry Badge, we got the Brown Bess musket is still a part of our history and heritage and tradition, both in the United States Army and also for the Continental Army and this Minuteman concept. And back in those days, to be a member of the local militia, it was every military-age male. You had to furnish generally your own weapons. You had to have your own shot and powder charge and provisions, where in the with a minute's notice, you could be woken up in the middle of the night, get dressed, grab your stuff, and go, and you were going to have what you need to bear arms or to function in a military capacity, of where the Second Amendment was coming from, in a self-defensive nature. So back then it was the Brown Bess musket or similar muskets, smoothbore muskets, some of them rifled, depending on who had those or could get them at the time. But what would that kind of musket look like today? If we are trying to keep this timeless concept alive, but we're doing a 2020, a 21st century rendition of what would the common man have as a rifle that's quite frankly worth a damn, that could survive a fight, it could survive extenuating circumstances, austere conditions. Maybe there's not a lot of time to clean or maintain it. It's going to be carried and dragged around a lot. It's going to have to perform its function. But we're trying to do this in a way that does not break the bank. And I firmly believe you don't need $1 million to get yourself or build yourself a quality AR-15. And yes, I do believe it would be the modern Brown Bess, or in this case, the Black Bess musket. The modern rendition would be an AR-15. And if we're doing that, how do we make that reminiscent of the task and purpose and the conceptual basis behind the original foundation, the eternal light of the Second Amendment? How do we do that in a way where your everyday common man or woman, anybody, could get themselves a modern day version of a Brown Bess musket and do it in a way that is financially able to happen? That's not $1 million, but at the same time, we're not scraping rock bottom and just going cheap as possible and then ending up with a rifle that is absolute trash, that's going to fall apart or break, and the components and parts on it are just garbage. So that is what the Black Bess musket project is all about. And I do look forward to getting that process started. I'm going to run through, the task and purpose of it. I'm going to run through the choices being made on the rifle of what parts we are going to prioritize in terms of the budget and what absolutely needs to be quality, even if it's not the cheapest option we can go with, versus what is some options on the rifle that, these are still going to be fine, but here's different ways things could be made a little better, but based on budget. So I'm trying to keep it within $700 to $750 at maximum in terms of the budget of building and handpicking the components going into this Black Bess modern musket of an AR-15 that is not $1 million, but it is still quality in all the right ways where it needs to be quality, so it could survive an actual fight and survive extended circumstances, be a useful rifle for the rest of your life, and is a rifle that's quite frankly just worth a damn. And it's not going to have all the crazy cool guy tricked out stuff. It is going to perform its function for you. And that is the conceptual idea behind the Black Bess musket project. So I just wanted to shed some light on that since I don't have the part 1 out yet. Still going through post-production. But in the meantime, wrapping this entire almanac up, I'm very glad that you're here. Thanks for sticking in till the very end, and thanks for listening.